Greetings, leaders. Welcome to Leadership Is Podcast. I am your host, Jason Muhammad, founder of JM Leadership Development. I'm here to talk to you about Anchor. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. It's free. There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will even distribute your podcast for you on platforms like Spotify, Apple, and many more. You can even make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make in a podcast in one place. So listen, download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. And always remember, leadership is influence and service.
What I see in my own personal experiences and with my clients are that you could actually have a really meaningful, deep, powerful experience in the virtual space.
Yeah.
Whether it's like a team meeting or an in-depth training or a conference, there's so much that if you're using the technology well, there's so much that can happen in that space. And I think that's really exciting.
Greetings, leaders. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Leadership Is Podcast, episode 52, with my special guest, Dr. Amy Climer of Amy Climer Consulting. Creative leadership, how to build creative teams. That's what we're talking about today. Many people hate going to team meetings and discussing team meetings, and they would rather do it all through an email. But what if there was a way to really have your team members engaged in a meeting? Let's talk about that. Greetings, leaders. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Leadership Is Podcast. I am your host, Jason Muhammad, founder of JM Leadership Development. This is actually episode 52 of season 1. Yay, go, yay, go, yay. So you're very excited about this. And of course, there's no better way to close out season 1 with a very special guest, Dr. Amy Climer. Dr. Amy Climer teaches teams to be creative and innovative. She is a speaker, trainer, and a coach in creativity, innovation, and team development. She uses research-based practices, tools, and techniques to teach teams how to innovate on demand. Amy holds a PhD in leadership and change from Antioch University. She is trained or certified in creative problem solving, immunity to change, and in the foresight thinking system. She developed the deliberate creative teams scale to help teams understand how to increase their creativity. She is the designer of Climer cards, a creative and team building tool used by thousands to deepen team conversations and generate ideas, and a fun pack of cards, should I add. In 2016, she won the Carl Runke Creativity Award from the Association for Experimental Education. Welcome, Amy.
Welcome. Thank you so much, Jason. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So besides, all that I just shared there, which was a wonderful resume, by the way, tell us more of who you are and what you do and, what's your life's mission.
Sure. So I have a company called Climer Consulting, which sounds like it's really big, but the reality is it's just me. And mostly what I do is I work with teams and organizations and I help them be more creative and innovative. So a lot of times, there are many organizations, they want to be creative, they care about it, they know it's important, but they don't quite know the how. And so I help them understand how it actually works. So I do a lot of trainings and keynotes and some coaching. And I, as far as my life's mission, I really believe that as humans, we have this potential to solve every problem on this planet, most of which we've created. But we just need to really tap into our creativity to do that. And so I get excited about helping people be more creative.
Wow. Yeah, that's awesome. I actually have work with an organization that, we may need to connect you with as it relates to creative teamwork. Because, we definitely can use your assistance a little bit with that. So we'll be talking further on that.
Awesome.
Yeah. How have climber cards helped you with your consulting business, and how could leaders use them to further their development?
Sure. So I guess it's been almost 10 years now. Back in 2012, I created this deck of cards called Climer cards. And it looks, kind of like a pack of playing cards, the same size and shape. And on one side are 50 different images that I drew. And they're like really basic, kind of iconic. They're these just almost like if you think of a simple coloring book page, that kind of like, black outlined, very simple images, images like an iron and a sewing machine and a person riding a bike and mountains, and then like some abstract images. And the purpose of the cards is the people can spread them out on the table, and then they can use them to spark ideas. That's one way. And then they can also use them to spark conversation. So there's kind of a couple different ways to use them. One of the things that happens when we're trying to be creative is that we get stuck, right? We've all had this experience where you're trying to come up with some ideas and you get a few ideas out of your head and you're like, okay, now what?
Yeah.
And, you might be like staring around your room or your house or whatever. And sometimes you just need more input, and you just need some different, like these images just help spark new ideas. And so it might be like, okay, you're looking at a picture of an elephant. Like, what about that elephant might spark a new idea for your particular problem?
Mm-hmm.
And it's really interesting what people come up with. It's really fun as well. So I use them a lot with my clients, and then I also sell them to other facilitators and teachers. And then they use them with theirs either for ideation or for generating conversation. So you might start a meeting off to say, like, let's say it's a group that's never met each other. Then everyone pick a card that represents something about you. And then they're using that card for introductions. And people say things they wouldn't say without the cards. And it helps like create deeper connections quicker, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's how they've helped me, and they've helped a lot of people. I'm pretty proud to say they have been used in 41 countries in all 7 continents now.
Wow.
Yeah, I really
Congrats on
proud of
that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So now you have also been, and like I said, at times I get off script, but you have also been doing these virtual trainings as well, to how to really function and fly in the digital space. So how has that been going? What's your feedback from that?
Well, it's been going really well. It all kind of evolved organically. March 2020, all of us were impacted by COVID. And a lot of friends and colleagues and clients were reaching out to me to say, hey, Amy, I know you've been working in the virtual space for a while, and I know you know how to use Zoom well, and I got to lead this training, and I don't know what I'm doing. Can you help me? And at first I was just like, oh yeah, sure. Let's jump on a call. I'll help you out. And then like the requests kept coming. I was like, wait a minute, I cannot help all these people. And then I realized, in fact, I was kind of joking. I was like, what am I, like the Zoom expert or something? Then I was like, oh, wait a minute. Maybe there's something there. I should pay attention to the questions people are asking, right?
Yeah.
So I launched an online course called Leading Engaging Virtual Meetings. And let's see, that was last like April 2020. And now we're about a little over a year later. And I've had a few hundred people take that course. And it's what I think is so exciting, and that, spring of 2020, like we were collectively as a society, we were really bad at running virtual meetings or virtual trainings. And now just our collective skills have skyrocketed.
Yeah.
And what I see in my own personal experiences and with my clients are that you can actually have a really meaningful, deep, powerful experience in the virtual space.
Yeah.
Whether it's like a team meeting or an in-depth training or a conference, there's so much that if you're using the technology well, there's so much that can happen in that space. And I think that's really exciting.
Yeah. So do I. And you know what? It kind of seems like there was a setup What I mean by a setup is that students are getting tired of the virtual space and burnout. And so, but you guys were always on your phones, always on your digital things. And so now you're tired of it. And now you want to go back to being in person and being outside and whatnot. And so I think that's a good, that's a good thing.
Totally.
Yeah, for them socially. So
Yeah.
yeah. So that's excellent. That's excellent. So you've kind of tapped into it a little about, because some people, such as yourself, have really like, with their, money monetize this whole COVID-19 and the impact of COVID-19. So how is your business really impacted? First of all, before COVID, after COVID-19 happened. So how has COVID impacted your business?
Well, I think one of the things that happens when there's this inverse relationship between stress and creativity. And so as people's stress increases, their creativity decreases. And so last spring, 2020, the stress collectively in our global, I mean, that would just be fascinating if we could like see a heat map of the stress levels around the world. I'm sure it would be very high. So collectively our stress is increased because all of a sudden we don't know what's going to happen. Everybody's freaking out about, am I going to get sick? Am I going to pass away? Are my family members? Am I going to have a job? I mean, there were so many unknowns. So nobody was interested in learning about creativity or figuring out how they could be more creative. I mean, in some ways, yes, but they weren't interested in training around that.
Yeah.
So, and I got that like right away. I was like, oh, I am not going to talk about creativity for the next 2 months because nobody cares. And rightfully so, So initially there was a decrease in that interest. And then I would say about August or September 2020, I saw, people were kind of settling in. We had a better understanding of what COVID was, from a scientific perspective, but we also just socially had developed this new pattern, these new norms of how we were operating. And people were like, okay, now I can settle down. We were thinking about that creativity training, months before. Let's revisit that. And so then, so that was an initial shift, and that the thing that I did the most of all of a sudden became the thing I did the least of.
Wow.
Now then, fortunately, I was able to do this facilitation, on how to facilitate virtually. And so that was really nice to be able to kind of fill that space there. And both from a financial perspective, but also from a sense of purpose.
Yeah.
I mean, I just feel like that's a big impact of, I think that's the reason people need to work, is because we need a sense of purpose and we want to be able to contribute in some way, no matter how small or big. And so that was really nice. I just felt like I was able to connect with people that I never would have met otherwise. I started doing a lot more free webinars, and now pretty much every time I do a free webinar, there's at least one person from outside of the United States there. And sometimes there's even several people from several different countries, I've had people like show up at 3 a.m. in their time zone. It's like, what?
Wow.
I mean, It is so cool. And so that's been a real positive of, I wouldn't say that's a positive of COVID, but I would say it's a positive of just some of the changes that I made, if that makes sense.
It does. Yeah, well, that's awesome. So, one of the things that I teach within my leadership development courses is the 3 mindsets of next generation leaders, which is to adapt, innovate, and connect. And so COVID-19 has really taught us that if leaders are not able to adapt, and then innovate and then connect, there's going to be a lot of, blow away, there's going to be a lot of closures. There's going to be a lot of, furloughing happening. There's a lot of, this, that, and the third that's happening. So, yeah.
I totally agree.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So go ahead.
And I was going to say, I think we really saw that so vividly this last year, and that there were some organizations and some companies that did a really great job of adapting, innovating, and connecting. And they're now thriving, whether, it's not just about the finances. They're also thriving in that they're serving even more than they were.
Absolutely.
And that there's others that were like, yeah, whatever, this will blow over in a couple months. I'm not going to make any changes. And now they're really struggling, and they haven't been able to either serve or even financially survive. Yeah. So I'm right with you there. I love that. Adapt, innovate, connect.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And this reminds me of something I learned from Gary Vanderchuck. He says, as a business, fall in love with your ideal customer over your product, because again, your product has a tendency to, become antiquated. Right. But your ideal customer will always let you know what their needs are. And ideal customers are those that are been loyal to you, free advertisement, right? So
Yeah.
yeah. So
I agree with that. That's great.
yes, ma'am. So here's so give my audience, our audience, 3 leadership tips.
So are you thinking like tips on how to be a great leader or be a strong leader?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So the first that comes to mind is, and it almost feels cliche, but I do think you need to be yourself and be your best self. I mean, not be yourself that's the cranky, I got to wake up too early this morning. Not that self, but the self that's like really strong, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, I mean, one of the things that I struggled in my business. So I've been in business since 2009, and at the beginning, the first several years, it kind of took me a while to get traction. And when I look back, I realized it was partly because I was looking around and I was watching what other people were doing, and I was trying to copy what they were doing.
Yeah.
And when I was able to figure out, like, let me use them as examples, but do it with my own personality, my own way, I was way more successful. Yeah. And that's what I mean by be yourself. Like, figure out what is it that you bring that's unique. And it doesn't have to be like this really, big thing. It could just be, your sense of humor or the way you connect with people, or it can be something very simple. But I also think not only is that important in how you serve, but it's also important because if you're not being yourself, it sucks up a lot of energy.
Yeah.
And you're going to be a lot more tired. So I think the first thing would be yourself. The second tip is one that has really become a mantra for me. And this is specifically around creativity. So creativity is something that there's a lot of confusion about it and how it works and whatnot. It's not something that will happen by accident. And so I have developed this mantra: be deliberate to be creative. That if you want to be creative, you have to be intentional about it. You have to put the work in. I mean, even as something as simple as like starting a podcast and thinking about, well, what's my angle, my audience? Who am I going to invite? What questions am I going to ask?
Right.
That takes work. I know you've seen that, Jason.
Yeah.
And to do it well and to bring out like a creative angle, you just got to be deliberate about it, be intentional about it. So that would be my second tip: is be deliberate to be creative. And then the third tip is, and I hope this might sound like I'm contradicting myself, but I do think it's helpful to find some people to role model after, whether you actually know them or not. I don't know that is always important. I mean, if you can get to know them, that's great. And you can, they can be your mentor or whatnot, but it could even just be like to watch other people and see what they do and be able to think, okay, let me learn from that experience. There's definitely some people that I have learned from who I've never met and I probably never will meet. People who've written books or they have podcasts out, who really influenced me in a positive way. And I think right now we're just in this really exciting time because there's so much available. I mean, even compared to 2009 when I started this business, there's just like, I don't know, 10 or 100 times worth of information or worth of like people who are sharing and putting their stuff out there. And so that would be the other thing, is just like, get out there and learn the stuff, whatever it is you're trying to learn, and, put that effort into it. Find those role models or those people that you admire that you want to not copy, but use as inspiration.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much. So, do you have any closing comments, contact information, how people can get involved with Amy Climer Consulting and the Climer cards?
Sure. So if you want to connect with me as far as training or Climer Consulting, you can go to climerconsulting.com, and Climer is spelled Climer. So there's no B in it. And if you're curious about Climer cards, you can go to climercards.com. There's also a virtual version that I launched this past year. I worked with a software company to develop a web app, which has been a whole exciting adventure for me, for sure. But there's several hundred facilitators already using them around the world, and it's been really fun. So you can use them either virtually or physically in person.
Very good. Very good. Well, Amy, it has indeed and always is an honor to be in the space with you, sharing space with you, and looking forward to doing this again in season 2 of Leadership Is podcast. And again, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jason, for having me on the show. It's a pleasure.
Are you promoting the right people into leadership positions? How do you know? How do you measure the outcomes, and are they the outcomes you're looking for? Please visit www.jmleadershipdevelopment.com. Again, www.jmleadershipdevelopment.com, and request a half-hour conversation to assess if we can address your leadership development needs. Oh, and by the way, always remember that leadership is influence and service.
Hey, greetings, leaders. Thank you for enjoying another episode of Leadership Is podcast, which happened to be the last episode for this season, season 1, episode 52, featuring Dr. Amy Climer of Amy Climer Consulting. And she was letting us know about her Climer cards, that she uses for creative team development. And she also gave us 3 leadership tips. Number 1, she said, be yourself. There's no, better way to say that than just to say that. Be yourself. And that's kind of what is called it's something that a lot of the leaders have said on the podcast, being your authentic self, be true to yourself, be yourself. Number 2 is be deliberate to be creative. Be deliberate to be creative. Number 3, she said, find those people to model after. Find people to model after. Now, that is not, as she stated in the podcast, it's not necessarily in contrast to being yourself. But again, there is something in everyone else or someone else, rather, that we may see that has certain aspects of success that we would like to achieve ourselves. Right. And so you may find someone who's doing that. So just find those people to model after. Look at what they're doing in the aspects or in terms of what it is that you're trying to do as well. JM Leadership Development, our primary goal here is to develop next generation leaders to leave the bench, embrace the growth mindset towards leadership, and step up. If you would like for us to do a virtual assessment trainings or presentations for your hidden leaders or keynote your next event, contact us for a free half-hour conversation at info@jmleadershipdevelopment.com. Visit our website, www.jmleadershipdevelopment.com, or call us at 828-333-7234, and we will respond promptly. Please subscribe to this podcast using Spotify, Google, and Apple, and others at Jason A. Muhammad /Leadership Is. Please follow us on social media. Twitter is @LeadershipJM. Facebook and Instagram is JM Leadership Development. And always remember, leadership is influence and service.